Okay, yeah, it is 5 p.m. in California. Notification Slack went out. I'm gonna wait like 2 minutes and then I'll go full screen on my presentation and go through the stuff. But yeah, thanks to all the folks who are already here and on time or early. Good to see you. And this is an interesting one. There's a lot of folks in the Taro community who are trying to also become LinkedIn influencers. So just kind of spun this up due to some aspect of popular demand. All right, final check. I'm not muted and my video is on, so things should be good. Hopefully the recording is fine. Ah, Rahul's here. Hello, Rahul. Oh, Rahul. Okay, there he is.
Hello, how's it
Hello.
going?
Okay, it was silent, so I was like, dang, is it broken? Is Zoom broken?
No, I hear you, I see you.
That's good. That's good. It'd be so sad if I just went through everything and then like the recording didn't work and was like muted or something.
Wait, have you already started the recording?
It's actually going to YouTube because I like how YouTube puts together the recording because like all the
Oh,
Zoom video files are always wonky, so it's on.
gotcha.
I'll just grab it from YouTube.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I think it's well, I'm just gonna get started. I'm gonna go full screen and just start talking and yeah. All right. So welcome everyone. This session is about how I write to LinkedIn and a lot of people read my stuff, which is pretty cool. It's been something I've been doing for around a year now. Surprisingly, doesn't really take me that much time. I spend like maybe 10 to 15 minutes per post, and like the average post I write probably gets between 50 to 75,000 views. It can go as high as like a million. And this has really had a lot of massive benefits just for a lot of the stuff that Rahul and I have been trying to do over the past couple of years, like, community building, teaching, and of course, just kind of like building up Taro as a business. LinkedIn has been truly invaluable throughout that process. And there's like a lot of folks within the community who are curious as to how I do it. And there's various Taro community champions who are also trying to grow their presence on LinkedIn. So I just thought I'd put together a presentation about how I do it. So let's start off with the background. So I truly believe this. I truly believe that LinkedIn is the future social media platform. So yeah, right now everyone's talking about TikTok, and TikTok is indeed massive, but I think LinkedIn is like frankly like kind of being slept on. So like LinkedIn has like pretty gargantuan numbers. It's approaching like 500 million monthly active users. I did a quick Google search before this presentation, and I think it's around 350 to 400 million monthly actives now. So it's still like decently far away from like a billion active users, but I mean 9 digits, it's still crazy. And I think unlike these other social media platforms, it has no real competitors because it's focusing on this professional niche. And LinkedIn only becomes more necessary a tool for just humans across the world as the global economy modernizes and there's more of these white collar knowledge workers like yourselves and me. And it is 10 times easier to get 10,000 followers on LinkedIn compared to platforms like Instagram, TikTok, and all the other ones. Which is a big reason why I continue posting to LinkedIn to this day. Like the ROI is just amazing. And yeah, like the barrier to entry for just kind of growing a LinkedIn following is relatively low. Again, like much lower than all these other platforms that I've mentioned. So here's kind of like my background, like kind of my story. So in mid 2021, Rahul and we launched a tech career growth community on LinkedIn. Like we created a tech career growth quote unquote company page. We started hosting events on LinkedIn. Some of you might have found us during that time. This was before we made Taro. We were purely doing it as like a community service because COVID was really bad during this time. So yeah, we started just putting our stuff on LinkedIn, but I wasn't posting really like to LinkedIn at that point. It was more of kind of like a logistics mechanism to just host the events. And I think LinkedIn algorithmically drove a lot of traffic to these events because I mean, you're stuck at home, right? Why not attend some virtual events and learn? And that's kind of the niche that we helped fill during that time. And then in mid 2022, we launched Taro, and I started posting to LinkedIn more seriously because, well, I have a business to grow and I wanted to succeed. And today I have around 66,000 followers on LinkedIn. I didn't really have anything when I started in mid 2021. I just had my connections. I think when we launched Tech for Growth Community, I had like maybe 800 to 1,000 connections. So, at most 1,000 followers. So it's grown, many fold since that time. I think in mid 2022, I was getting followers from the Tech Career Growth Community, which is essentially kind of like the free version of Taro. But I think I had like maybe 10,000 or 15,000 followers in mid 2022. So yeah, 66,000 today. I get 500,000 to 1 million post views per week. And as I mentioned in the beginning, I spend just 10 to 15 minutes on average writing each post that goes on my LinkedIn. So here are the absolute basics on just how to get started with building up your presence on LinkedIn. Number one, make your profile not terrible. So have a good headshot. Hopefully you have one of those. Even if you're not trying to become an influencer, you just want a good headshot just to get jobs on LinkedIn, which is the primary purpose of LinkedIn for the vast majority of people. If you're going to become a creator, then you should turn on creator mode. What this does is instead of showing 500 plus connections, it's going to show like how many followers you have, and then it's just going to kind of orient your profile so it looks more like influencery, and you can have like featured hashtags that you talk about and stuff like that. So yeah, very nice aesthetic adjustment if you turn on creator mode. And then just fill in your tagline, the hashtags, the topics that you specialize in, and your work experience. And then I don't know if people have access to this if they're not creators, but there's a feature where you can kind of pin your just whatever posts you want to have more views, like your favorite posts or best performing posts or both. And then when people come to your profile, they can see kind of like your greatest hits, right? So I've pinned like maybe 15 to 20 posts of like kind of the better ones I've written throughout the past year and a half. And yeah, it's a pretty nice like widget on your profile. So pretty much all the things that LinkedIn's onboarding flow asks you to do, you should just do them. The onboarding flow, I think, is pretty reasonable. And I do think like all the steps that LinkedIn has you go through does add more to your profile. And unlike a resume, LinkedIn doesn't really punish you for verbosity. LinkedIn is the place where you just dump everything about yourself, right? Because like if a recruiter is looking at your profile and they don't want to read everything, they just, they'll just read the first page or two and then they'll scroll off, right? And that's perfectly fine. But if they do want to keep going further, then yeah, they'll just keep reading. Resumes, like resumes are in the hiring flow directly, like they've already been sent in. So they have to be really like concise. So Rahul and I recommend that if you're submitting a resume for a job, it should be pretty much just one page 98% of the time. And then if you have a ton of experience, then maybe you can have 2 pages, but you have to keep the resume like really, really short, but that's not the case for LinkedIn. It's almost the opposite. And yeah, next step is connect. So you get like 100 connection requests per week, and LinkedIn is just by far the most generous platform when it comes to follower acquisition, because when someone accepts your connection request, if you are a creator, they automatically become a follower of yours as well. So you can think about it as like LinkedIn gives you the ability to acquire up to 100 followers per week, like for free. And connecting with people is actually pretty easy, just a single button click. So if your goal is to get big on LinkedIn, figure out who your target audience is, like what kind of content do you want to create for like what kind of people. And then LinkedIn search is like pretty decent, and you can just find people in that demographic and then just connect with them. Ideally start with those who are second degree connections, like you and that person both know someone, have that connection in common, and then you work your way from there. So in Rahul and I's case, like we're trying to build Taro to help software engineers lead more fulfilling careers. So back when my LinkedIn following was really small, I would just search like software engineer at Airbnb, and I would just connect with like all of them. And it only took me like a few minutes because you get like a page of 20 per list of search results. Clicking the connect button takes like a second, so it really doesn't take that long. So I remember back when I was like more on the grind, I would like one of the first things I would do every week was just use my 100 connection requests. I would just keep doing it until LinkedIn goes like, you used up all your requests. You don't have any more. And nowadays I don't do that anymore. Number one, because not as much of a need because I have a bigger following, but also I'm literally running out of connection slots. You're only allowed 30,000 connections on LinkedIn, and I have like 29,000 something, and I'm just saving the last couple hundred spots to connect with folks like you, other Taro Premium members. So yeah, that's how it is now. But until you get to 30,000, which I'm sure like most of you, if not all of you, are not anywhere near 30,000, this is pretty much like a free follower acquisition mechanism. Yeah. Another absolute basic tip, avoid post embeds. I see a good amount of people make this mistake. So here's an example. So like, here's this fake post I didn't actually post, and I'm sharing this resource, right? And you can see that there's this kind of preview card underneath the text of my post, and then there's the X. And you don't want that preview card to be there. If it shows up, just hit the X and get rid of it. The algorithm just heavily punishes posts that essentially carry another piece of content within it, because like you have the post and then you have like essentially a sub kind of piece of content within the post. And this is actually not specific to LinkedIn. This is actually part of social media overall. I worked at Instagram. Instagram did the same thing. Like if we actually wanted to punish people who just like had like additional, like they have content within content, because it's just very jarring. And a lot of them are also like reshares, which is like kind of like lazy content, because like you're not really like organically creating an entire piece of content, right? Like there's someone else's content and you're just attaching like a tiny piece of commentary to it, or maybe just none at all. And that's not the behavior that we wanted at Instagram. And it looks like LinkedIn made the same decision, and like Facebook. I think all the big social media platforms, like if you have like the content embed, it's not going to have a great time statistically. So yeah, link preview, probably the most common one. There's also like the reshares. So right now there's two ways to kind of, if you're gonna piggyback off someone else's post, there's like reshare, where like you have your own post and then it has like a card of their post within it. That's the first one. And then someone recently introduced something called repost, where you literally take their exact same post and you like actually post it to your feed, and then it feels more like just one post. It's kind of like you just took their post and like put your name on it almost. And you don't have like this additional like kind of text like inception-y layout for it. So if you really like someone else's post, don't reshare it, use the repost option instead. And yeah, in event embeds, this is probably like you're not familiar with this, but if you create a LinkedIn event, like if you share a LinkedIn event, it's going to generate like this event card within it. For some reason, LinkedIn really hates that. I have no idea why. It does even worse than like the link preview and the post reshare. It's like a 25x like drop in engagement if you share like that event card. Like if you're going to share a link to a LinkedIn event, just share the link. Don't let it create that like preview card. Just share the link directly. And that applies to kind of just sharing links in general as well. It is weird to me, because like I would have thought LinkedIn would prefer having people link to other stuff within the LinkedIn ecosystem, but LinkedIn just really hates their own events for some reason. Like that's what I found historically, and I've done this many times. Like I'm like mathematically confident that you just never want to do event embeds. Okay, so let's talk about kind of general content strategy on like just how to write compelling stuff that like people read. So the first step is, as I've mentioned so many times before, with interview prep, with side projects, all these other things in the field of software engineering, consistency is key. And it may sound annoying, but it's 100% true. So if you are seriously pursuing the LinkedIn game, you should try to post at least 3 to 4 times a week, in my opinion. You can go as high as twice per day. And I feel like scheduling like helps a lot. So how I write my content is I'll have like a time block where all I do is just sit there and just like write like a bunch of LinkedIn posts. So I don't have to go back to the to my LinkedIn like every day to like write new content. So I just kind of get it all out in one go. And that's personally really helped me just like hit that, I post pretty much to LinkedIn daily and the scheduling helps a lot. So before I talk about momentum, I think a lot of people are worried about cannibalization, which is like your own content is taking views from your other content. So yeah, if you run a YouTube channel and you post like every day or every other day, that would be pretty insane. And you're definitely going to have cannibalization. But I think since the content on LinkedIn is much more lightweight, like so much of the content on LinkedIn is just like a little bit of text, LinkedIn doesn't really like punish you for just like going ham and just like posting a lot of stuff. So I think the cannibalization doesn't really kick in until like literally until you go to twice per day. Like if you post like less than 14 times a week, your content isn't really cannibalizing each other. And I've just tested this a lot from my experience. And another thing about LinkedIn is that it doesn't have the concept of momentum, very much unlike YouTube. And the idea of momentum is if you post like a bad piece of content, then your next piece of content will get downranked. So even if your next piece of content is really good, it'll just get less views because like the algorithm is just unhappy with you publishing like a stinker before. LinkedIn doesn't have that concept at all. Like you can write a LinkedIn post that just like completely dies and gets like 100 views, and your next post get like 100K views or 1 million views or something if it's the right post. Like LinkedIn does not again, it doesn't punish you for just whiffing, but YouTube heavily does. And I've actually been doing YouTube for a long time. I was one of the first YouTubers to hit 100K subscribers back in like 2009. I was YouTubing in high school. And yeah, if you publish stuff that just like didn't do well in the algorithm, your next several videos, even if they're really good, would also suffer. It's really brutal. But yeah, LinkedIn doesn't have that, which is great. Yeah, and when it comes to LinkedIn, if you post too rarely, like you post like once a week or like once every 2 weeks or something, you're just leaving views on the table. Like your opportunity cost is there. Okay, so the mental framework that I use when it comes to just LinkedIn and content creation, honestly, just like a lot of stuff, like navigating your career in general, is explore and exploit. So the idea of exploration is you're just trying out a bunch of stuff and then seeing what lands. And then once you find something that lands, then you move into the exploit phase, which is, okay, I found this thing that works. I'm just going to keep doing it and like repeating the playbook until it stops working. So yeah, in the beginning, you always just want to try as many things as possible. This also applies to like when you're figuring out what tech stack to specialize in, like just keep trying stuff until like something resonates with you. And look for patterns among like what works. So like when it comes to LinkedIn, there's many different ways you can structure your posts, and I'll talk more about that later. But like once you start seeing posts of yours that do substantially better than all the others, it's important to really reflect and ask yourself like, okay, why is this post unique compared to all the other ones? Like what is it doing that the posts that are suffering is not doing, right? And extract those patterns, and then you can move to exploit phase like with those patterns. So your goal is to just find your content archetype, i.e. something that you've done which works and you can consistently reap benefits from doing it. So once you find that archetype, you kind of find your rhythm. You find that like one post style that does really well. You just keep exploiting that style until it stops working. You keep making posts of like a similar kind of structure and vibe until they stop getting views. And something you can do, well, you should do if you could, but like ideally, you never put all your eggs in one basket, right? Because if you find like one thing that works, and then you just only keep abusing that until it stops working. Like once it stops working, you're just going to be, you won't have a leg to stand on, right? So ideally, once you find something that works or multiple things that works, you go into exploit phase for those, but then on the side, you're still experimenting and trying out like new new content formats so that, well, you can learn more. And then if the old stuff doesn't work anymore, you have some new stuff that you can kind of move to exploit phase, and you just kind of keep that like flywheel going. So let's talk about the most important button on LinkedIn. So I grabbed a post on LinkedIn and I extracted the top part. It looks like this. And the button is this one. It's called See More. And the important thing to realize is that whether you're on LinkedIn Web or LinkedIn Mobile, how the posts show up is it will be truncated. I mean, there are some exceptions because if you have like a media attached to it, like a video or image, like that will be there. But no matter what, the text, they only show a little bit of the text. And the majority of the text, because like most people are going to post like 4, 5, 6, 7, 10 sentences in their post, the majority of the text is actually hidden by this button. And this is important because, well, you want people to click the button. Otherwise, most of the effort you put into the post is wasted. People are not going to see it. So this brings me to my next tactic. And this is pretty much how I view all of my content creation on LinkedIn. I don't write posts. I write first sentences. The sole purpose of the first sentence is to convince the reader to read the second sentence. And, and then once they click the see more and read the second sentence, like there's a good chance they'll read the rest of the post because they've already committed. They clicked the button, they spent that effort, right, to engage with the remainder of the content. And this means that the value proposition of your post must be immediately clear from the first sentence. And this is where I see like so many folks who are trying to grow on LinkedIn struggle is this is not the case for their content. Like they'll write a sentence and it's like a bunch of words and it like sounds nice, but it's not clear to me why I should invest the time to click the see more button and read the rest of the content. It's not clear to me how spending a couple extra seconds to go through the rest of this person's content is going to improve my life in some way. And there's a couple ways to kind of really make the value prop clear and make them think certain things like, well, will I feel something? This is actually, I think a lot of people misunderstand because a lot of people treat LinkedIn as I'm just going to like, share this great insight, like an experience from my career. I'm going to try to teach people because everyone wants to learn stuff, right? But I actually, when it comes to social media, I think a lot of people don't go there that much for tactical stuff. Like they actually go there as more of kind of like, it's almost like an emotional exchange where he exchanged time to feel certain emotions. LinkedIn is more about like kind of the positivity where like people go to LinkedIn to feel positive. Like if they happen to learn something professional, that's nice, but that's like a side benefit. Like the main reason actually to go there just to feel good. And there's also people who go to social media, like they actually want to feel angry. Like they won't admit it, but like they actually want to feel angry. So this is like, this is something to think about. Like, will your first sentence, if someone reads it, will they feel something from it, right? Feel some sort of strong emotion. Next one is, will I learn something? I mean, there are people on the internet interested in learning, but this is important, but I feel like it's not as emphasized. Like, it's not as big as people think. And this one is kind of some overlap with the previous one, but like, will I gain something? So there's like some sort of tactical benefit. So a very common post type on LinkedIn does very well is like recruiting posts. Like I'm a recruiter. I actually saw this recently. I'm a recruiter at Netflix. I'm hiring for L3s, junior engineers, and they made a post like, hey, we're hiring for new guys, right? So, and then comment if you want your resume potentially thrown in the pool. So from the first sentence, it's pretty clear that like, okay, I could gain something from interacting with this post. Like I could gain an interview with Netflix, right? And that's like very valuable. So this is something to think about if you're something very important to think about if you're thinking of getting into LinkedIn. It's just like, put yourself in the shoes of the reader and ask yourself, like, if I read just the first sentence of my post, is it clear to me the value that I can extract by spending more time to engage with the post? And just be like really honest with yourself about that. And I've done this a lot where like I'll read a post draft and I'll read the first sentence and I'm like, yeah, this is just a bunch of words. I have to make it sharper. This happens to me all the time. Okay, so talking about content archetypes, now I'm going to talk about mine, the Alex style. If you're feeling unoriginal, feel free to copy me. That's fine with me. So I just like walk through my specific process and how I write posts. So here's the secret. I actually don't super enjoy writing to LinkedIn. This is the secret you guys now get access to by being as part of this session. My actual writing style and what succeeds on LinkedIn are actually very different. And LinkedIn generally rewards this kind of very short, snappy writing that doesn't really handle the nuance at all. And that is not how I write, like in reality. So this is actually a reason why I have to write posts and focus blocks, because I can't just spend some time every day writing to LinkedIn. That would be very unfun. I just kind of sit down and get it all out of the way in one go. It does get better generally when I get the ball rolling and I've written a couple posts and I have that momentum, but it's tough for me to kind of put myself in that like writer's mood to like write a bunch of LinkedIn stuff. And it's because, again, like what LinkedIn and social media rewards in general doesn't really match like how I actually write. But yeah, if you want to see my true writing style, you should, just read my answers in the Taro forum. Like I usually leave very long, detailed answers that account for, all the nuance, all the edge cases, and that, like how I usually write literally will surpass the character limit on LinkedIn like 95% of the time. But anyways, that out of the way, my kind of main advice, like my kind of the core part of my style is try to keep it short and don't be too smart. I didn't realize this in the beginning. I actually used to write very long posts. This was back in like 2021, like early 2022. I'd write very long posts because I would try to write it as kind of like a minified version of like how I answer questions in Taro. Like 99% of those posts didn't do well because I was trying to be too smart and the posts were too long. And I've tried, like I'm mentoring like many other people now, like how to get bigger on LinkedIn. And this is the mistake that like 95% of them make, is like they it's too long and they're trying to be too smart. And it's tricky because like, a lot of people in engineering, like probably all of you in this room, in this call, are like all very smart, right? And it's really hard to kind of suppress that instinct. So here's an example of like a post that I wrote somewhat recently, like a month and a half ago, which got like, I don't know, 200,000 views or something. But this is kind of like the Alex archetype. So 5 to 9 sections. A section is just like something that's separated by a new line. So you'll see there's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So it's like, not that many. Like anything that's like 10 or above is just like crazy long, in my opinion. Each section is just 1 to 3 lines. So this one's actually like kind of pretty clean. Like if you look at all the kind of the sections here, it's just each one is 2 lines. So short and snappy. Yeah, the LinkedIn style of like new line breaks everywhere is just kind of a meme. So pretty much all my posts are just text based. Again, I don't have like a ton of time. Turns out running your own startup is very difficult. So I don't have like a ton of time to just write cringe posts on LinkedIn. So like 99% of my posts are just text, because it's just the lowest amount of effort I have to put in. And kind of how I do it is I will kind of write the lead in. I'll explain the problem, explain the topic, share some context. And then in order for people to really engage with the topic and like learn more, I'll link some Taro resource. And that's pretty much my playbook. So like, in the Taro link, they'll be able to actually learn the topic like end to end, and they'll understand like all the nuance behind it, which again, it's hard for me to cover in the post because that would just like make the post like 2 or 3x or 5x longer, which will just kill the reach of the post. Yeah, so lead in tactics, like how do I get people to kind of engage with the first sentence and click that see more button? So I try to use one or more of these kind of strategies when writing that first sentence. First one is loss aversion. The second one is showing numbers. Third one is subverting expectations. And the fourth one is rage against the machine. And I'm going to have examples for all of these, and pretty much all of them are for posts that have gotten over 250,000 views. So loss aversion. The idea of loss aversion is you're kind of preventing someone from like doing a bad thing. So the value prop is like, you currently have a negative attached to you, and I want to help you get rid of that negative, because that's technically a gain, right? Because when it comes to gaining in general, there's kind of 2 ways. You can either like attach a positive thing to you, that's a gain, that's like a net gain, or you can remove a negative thing attached to you, which is also a net gain. Right. And this is admittedly a strategy I use probably too much, but it's like relatively easy. Like a lot of my posts will follow this. So like, here's an example. Like one of the biggest mistakes I saw among low performing software engineers is believing that being independent means not asking that many questions. So the idea is that like, no one wants to be a low performing engineer, right? And like, no one, like people don't want to make mistakes. So the value prop is like, oh, I might be doing this thing and I want to stop doing this thing because like this author is telling me like that it's bad, right? I think a lot of people, they opt for the other one, which is just like kind of a standard game, which is like, I did a good thing and I learned this, and that'll be the first sentence like of their post. But I think it's just too vague, because I feel like the loss aversion strategy is much more primal, because like no one wants to be the thing, no one wants to be the person that's like messing up, and it's just not entirely clear like what the value prop is, because there's like an infinite amount of positive things out there. So like, why is the positive thing in your post going to be relevant to me? That's like what people are thinking. So I've seen a lot of like folks on LinkedIn struggle because they always try the opposite of this, and it's just hard to get those posts to land. a lot of the time, because again, the value prop, it doesn't feel as powerful. Like someone is showing the numbers, this is actually something I learned in Instagram ads. Humans are just like naturally like attracted to numbers. Like math is such a core part of like your existence, like how society works. So just yeah, like literally just attaching numbers. It just makes the insight feel much more crispy. And there's like again, there's this visceral reaction that people have to numbers. Like something we saw while researching user behavior in Instagram ads is that ads with numbers tend to have more engagement in them. So here's one, about like meta engineers. Like the average meta engineer pushes 125 commits per half. I had a really good mentee who pushed 500 commits per half, which is 4x company average. Like ton of numbers in there. And yeah, I mean, this post did really well, like all the other ones did in this section. Next one is subverting expectations. This kind of tracks back to like, the value prop is like just making someone feel something. So this one I was talking about like how Instagram got to a ton of users with having very little automated test coverage. And the inspiration behind this is I've met a lot of engineers who essentially equate a high quality code base with having automated test coverage, i.e. if a code base doesn't have 90% or above automated test coverage, it's just by definition not good. So this post was purposely going against the grain of that mentality. So a lot of people are going to read this and be like, that is dumb, right? They're going to feel something. They're going to feel like maybe a bit of anger, right? When reading this post. But I mean, this is something, a concept I genuinely believe in. I thought it was like a really cool story. And that first sentence, again, is going to be subverting the expectations for like a lot of engineers, which, they're my readership base, right? So this is a very powerful post. Yeah, this one, probably my favorite. A rage against the machine. I mean, the idea is you're essentially kind of like rallying against the powers that be and like how they're oppressing like the little person, the underdog, right? And like I've always been an IC like my entire career. I mean I was close to transitioning to management at a couple points, but I've always been an IC. Like I've always been kind of I guess at the bottom. So there, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that like corporate executives and company leadership have kind of forced upon me. It's been really annoying, right? There's a lot of BS in the tech industry, just as there is in the rest of the world, right? So a lot of my posts are just trying to give a voice to the IC at the bottom of like, we're frustrated with this thing that execs do, which just doesn't make sense and just like makes our lives worse when we're just trying to like just write good code and like build quality software. So I think one of the prime examples of this, I'm not really a fan of like stringent agile methodology where you're going through like sprints and you have like backlog grooming and story pointing and you have like 75 meetings just to get anything on the roadmap. I've dealt with that firsthand. It was a crappy experience. So I essentially wrote like this post kind of like as a rant, right? And like a ton of engineers resonated with it. Yeah, afterward.
Hey,
So
Alex, I have a question. Is it convenient?
can you hold the question until the end? Sorry, I'm just gonna
Oh, sorry.
quickly
Yeah,
go
sure.
through. Yeah, no worries. But excited you have a question. Okay, so yeah, this is the final portion. Hopefully, just another 3-5 minutes. But yeah, never kind of the first thing I want to say in the afterword is just never forget that social media is random. So there's going to be like you're going to see posts in your LinkedIn feed that like don't follow, like they don't seem to follow any of the rules. Like they're going to violate all the guidelines of the presentation. Or sorry, you're going to like write posts that like follow all the rules. They're going to follow all the guidelines of this presentation, and they're not going to do well. And you're going to be like, well, I spent all this time like crafting the perfect post and it has a great message. Like, why is it not doing well? That's going to happen. And you're also going to see the inverse. You're going to see posts that are on your LinkedIn feed. You're going to have like some connection that like, gave it a heart. It has like 5,000 reactions and like 5 million views. And you're like, well, this post is garbage. Like it's like a bunch of links or it's like the first sentence doesn't make any sense. Like you'll just be wondering like why this post did well, and you're going to be like a bit frustrated, like maybe. And that's just going to happen. That's just how it is. It happens to me to this day. And it's important to not let it get to you because again, like social media is random. This is just bound to happen. Like there's always just going to be anomalies. And this is why consistency is really important because variance can be conquered with volume. So like I'd write a bunch of LinkedIn posts and there are a lot of posts that don't do as well as they think. But again, because of the variance of social media, there's also a lot of posts I write that actually do a lot better than I thought they would. So these kind of cancel out, right? Which is why pretty much like every single week, I it's super rare for me to have a week where it's like less than 500K views, because since I post so much, like the law of large numbers almost, like it kind of evens out. So again, there's going to be some underperformers, some overperformers, and it just works out because you have that consistency. Yeah, but if you're only writing like one post per week, of course it's going to be super spiky. Like one post is going to do amazing and get like 1 million views, the next one will be sucky and get like 10K views. Like, yeah, variance can be conquered with volume. And another very important thing is just social media. Like social media, there's a lot of garbage in social media. We all know this, right? And so it's important to decouple your emotional state from how well your social media does, because at the end of the day, it doesn't like really matter. Like LinkedIn isn't exactly like a pure bastion of intellectual discussion, despite being a supposedly professional network. There's so much stupid stuff on LinkedIn. It's staggering. So yeah, don't be afraid to disengage. Like, ignore your messages, ignore comments, ignore notifications. My notifications bell is actually stuck at 99 plus, and it's been that way for like many months. I just don't read the notifications. I don't read the comments on LinkedIn, even on my own posts, just because it's just too easy to get sucked in and like just argue with someone on the internet. It's not worth it. So yeah, that's kind of my spiel about like how I just post to LinkedIn and get a lot of views somehow without spending too much time. I hope it was helpful and made sense, and happy to kind of dive more into it now. As a reminder, this is all being recorded. So if you're not comfortable with your face/voice being on the screen, then you can just ask in the Zoom chat and I'll get to it. But yeah, happy to talk about, coming up with the creative process, how to come up with post ideas, how to find your content archetype, and just kind of, staying motivated throughout the process. A lot of kind of similar stuff to my side project session. Happy to talk about that. How to ask your question. Yeah, it'd be cool if you could ask in person. I just love talking with all of you folks. But if you want to go to the Zoom chat, it's also perfectly fine. And if I can't get to your question, I'll try to get to all of them. But if a question pops up in your brain after the session, feel free to ask it in the Taro Q&A forum, as always. So yeah, I'm gonna stop sharing now just so I can like see people, and happy to you can use the raise hand in the Zoom, and I'll get to you. Okay. Yeah, Jas, you're was first. What's your question?
Hi, Alex. Thanks for the presentation. This question is a bit off topic, but I noticed someone is attending who's working at Microsoft maybe. I was wondering if they have referral culture at Microsoft, this person, or if someone knows. So
Yeah, I'll chime in there. So there's a jobs channel in the Taro Premium Slack. I recommend joining that. There was someone offering Microsoft referrals there at some point. Someone has offered Microsoft referrals in the Taro community at some point. I know that for sure. But I think like every company has a referral culture because it's just much safer. Like, because if you've hired an employee, right, you trust this employee to be competent, and you trust their judgment, which means that the people that they know probably like are also competent, or at least they're statistically more competent than like the average person who goes through the application portal. So yeah, referrals are always good. I'm sure there's folks within Taro community who are at Microsoft and happy to refer. So yeah, if you're out there.
and a question about LinkedIn things. Do you think recruiters are like looking at people that apply to big tech jobs and give them like more, like their applications are more valuable if they have a lot of followers on LinkedIn or something? You think there's a correlation between that?
I'm pretty confident that it helps. Actually, there was a Taro member who got into Google straight out of school, and they actually mentioned that their large LinkedIn following, they have like 12,000 followers, actually helped them get the opportunity at Google. And they were just kind of like, I guess, a mini version of Rahul and myself, in that they were also just sharing software engineering career advice. So yeah, the brand is helpful. There's a question. I'll tackle this as well. There's a question in the chat. What are some of the benefits of having a large reach with your social media posts? Like, number one is just like, if you have a large amount of followers, it generally indicates that you have something that you've said things that are worth saying multiple times. So there's like a halo effect where people assume that like, oh yeah, you probably like know what you're talking about. And they, if I'm a recruiter and I've never heard of you, but I see the big follower count, I might actually click through like some of your posts and be like, oh, why are people following this person? Like, what is this person saying? And if it's like good engineering career advice and they see other engineers responding to your post and they're like, this is really insightful. Thank you. I applied this to my job and my manager loves me now. That's a huge benefit, right? That's kind of like a really powerful signal that shows that you're probably a leg above most other candidates, right? So that's, the brand and the halo effect is very valuable. And yeah, LinkedIn is primarily a recruiting platform still. It's still more of a tactical recruiting platform than it is social media. That's kind of the value that most users of LinkedIn are getting from it. So and they feed into each other. Like if you're big on the social media side of LinkedIn, then I'm sure it'll help you on the job side as well. I get a ton of inbound on LinkedIn. And I'm sure having 66,000 followers helps. Like people are still asking me, they're asking me to like quit my job at Taro and join like whatever company.
Question, Alex. What's your thought about, as usual, Elon Musk kind of talking about, LinkedIn is a bit of a cringe platform, and that he's going to create a new one to compete with it. I know that he's talked a lot about creating something and then delivered it quite late, and so on. So, and there's a lot of content in LinkedIn that just, feel a little bit inappropriate, or just they share too much or oversharing and so on. What's your tips around that as well?
Yeah. So I didn't know that Elon said that, but he said a lot of things. You just can't keep up. I mean, he's not wrong, right? And that LinkedIn is kind of cringe, right? Like LinkedIn has this culture of toxic positivity. Like everyone's just like there to like brag about whatever professional accomplishment they have, and it can be a bit suffocating, which is why I don't really engage that much on my LinkedIn feed. There's a lot of stuff like that. But what I will say is, between toxic negativity and toxic positivity, I would much rather have the toxic positivity. And pretty much every other social media platform is toxic negativity, including Twitter. So like that's why LinkedIn is like by far the social media platform I engage with the most. Again, I'd much rather have toxic positivity. Will Elon build a better LinkedIn? I don't know, probably not. I don't. I have a lot of thoughts about Elon. That's an entire session. Probably, so I'll just like cap it at that. Yeah, kind of like my thoughts on like kind of the Elon thing and kind of like LinkedIn as a whole. Sorry, what was your second question? Like the follow-up question?
Yeah, just about oversharing, and just, sometimes people tend to overshare certain things in their personal life, and it's just not. It doesn't really create any, I guess, branding for you. I mean, in fact, what it is, it's gonna do the opposite way, in that you're not really consistent in creating that brand. And sometimes you post about some useful stuff, technical stuff, and then sometimes, hey, got married or whatever.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I do think that stuff feels out of place for LinkedIn, given that it's a professional platform. But I think like there's just kind of like this law of large numbers that applies to social media, which is like, as you get bigger, the weirdness and the cringe and the toxicity scales up exponentially, right? So like, it's like pretty decent when you go from like, I don't know, let's say 0 to 10 million. But once you start going from like 10 to 100 million active users, like the cringe goes up like, 500x. And then you go from 100 million to 500 million, the cringe goes up like 10,000x. It's just like a rocket ship of cringe, and that's just how it is. And LinkedIn has definitely reached that escape velocity. They have hundreds of millions of active users. So, yep, it's definitely gotten cringier over the past 5 to 10 years. It's only going to get more cringy. But I still think LinkedIn has a lot of value, and it's kind of like the least worst among the big social media platforms, in my opinion. Hopefully that stays the same.
Awesome. Thank you, Alex.
Yeah, happy to chime in. Yeah, Zaman.
Alex. Thank you for the presentation. So I think you mentioned archetypes. So when you got started, let's say your first 3 months, did you base your content around another follower, for other people, how they were posting on LinkedIn, or used any resources, or did you just get stuck in and figured out your own type over time?
Yeah, that's a great question. For the most part, I was just like trying my own stuff. Like I couldn't really follow a lot of people's archetypes, especially the high effort ones, because like I didn't have a lot of time. But there actually was one person's archetype that I tried. There's this Google engineer, his name is Kevin Naughton, probably mispronounced it, but his archetype is he just posts really short, quippy stuff, which is like the best debugger is getting 8 hours of sleep. And that's like all of his posts, and they get like hundreds of thousands of views consistently. So I tried that like ultra short, quippy style for a bit, and like I just couldn't get it to work because I was like, oh, this is like relatively low effort, and I don't have a lot of time. I'm gonna try it. I didn't work, so I went kind of like a medium ground, which is like it's still text based, but it's instead of just 1 or 2 sentences, it's like 7 to 12, right? But yeah, there's a lot of archetype. Like someone who succeeded a lot over the past like just year and a half of posting LinkedIn is Alex Chiou. He's like the system design, like he's like the de facto system design guru now. And his archetype is he takes like a system design diagram of like, this is how Uber works, this is how Netflix works, and then he adds like all the his commentary about like just explaining the diagram. And it's like those posts just go crazy. Like each one gets like over 1 million views or like over 2,500, 5,000 reactions. But that's just too high. I don't have enough time to do that. I respect him a lot for he found his niche and just like totally crushed it. But yeah, I do recommend, like, if you're having writer's block, you should look at how other LinkedIn folks, like what kind of archetypes, like what's their style and format, and see if you can find inspiration, right? Because like there's you don't have to reinvent the wheel every single time, right? And I think that's generally a good thing, because even when I build mobile apps, I'll kind of take like apps that I use that I think are really sleek and that are really popular, like Airbnb, Venmo, all these other apps, and I'll kind of like marry different styles and components between them and like make my own kind of app and product from it. And like I think that's like kind of the best way to really kind of develop your own style, is you take inspiration from other people and you kind of like add your own flair to it, and hopefully you come out with something useful at the end of the process. Yeah, good question. Raghu?
Can I chime in?
Oh yeah, go for it.
I think it's so I've done something about this too. So I just want to share this guy Addy. I mean, Alex, we've talked about Addy Osmani before, right? So I mean, I would recommend you all to check out his profile. He's pretty big. Let me look at his follower count. 121,000 followers, and he is pretty senior at Google, which probably helps his credibility. But most of his posts are basically him ripping off is maybe a negative connotation, but him basically taking a inspirational image from some creator and adding some commentary on it. And I think the reason his posts get crazy engagement, I'm talking like 5, 10, 15,000 reactions, is because people really resonate with the illustration and some of his commentary too. And so that's like a really good way of just getting engagement if that's your goal. The downside is that it's harder to get people behind you and your mission, because you're effectively curating content rather than having original insight. And so it kind of just depends on, how important is it for you to be the one who's in the driver's seat and building the brand as a person, or are you okay also, sharing, like basically taking good content from other people and presenting it with some like frosting on top. That's actually what I did in the other thing I posted. I just took a video of Zuckerberg, and everyone loves these tech billionaires, right? And you cut out a clip from Zuck or someone else talking, and it's inspirational, or it's, it brings up some emotion. And that posted fairly well by my standards, at least. It had like, 400 reactions. So I think it's a pretty good post for my profile. So I just wanted to add that out there, put that out there that, a lot of it could just be curating really good content that you find on the internet. And there is some value in that, but there is a downside that you're not building your own brand.
Yeah, before I go through more of the raised hands, I think there were a lot of questions that were posted to chat like a while ago. So I'm going to speed run through like 3 or 4 of them. Yeah. So expanding on what are some benefits of having a large reach of social media posts. There is always value in having an attention cannon. You might not need it now, but like at some point in the future, it will be nice to have. So I talked about kind of the benefits of like building a brand to like help recruiters kind of, come to you as opposed to you having to go to them. But like a very tactical benefit, which Rahul and I have taken advantage of, is just bootstrapping your own thing, right? Whether it's a side project or your own company, LinkedIn has been tremendously valuable in doing that. And it's also like a relationship builder, right? Because like you can use it to uplift other people. So I've oftentimes mentioned other people in the Taro community to help them build their own brand. So it's a very valuable asset with a lot of tactical benefit. And just like if your goal is just to like help others, like altruism, like that's one of the most powerful things that a giant megaphone can help with, right? If there's like a cause, like a charity or a community that you really care about, just pointing an attention cannon at it is going to help it out a lot, right? And that's just going to make you feel very happy. And that's that's a very good benefit. Yeah. Next question is: do you use scheduling tools and do you post at random timings every day or at specific timings? Yeah, the scheduling is actually built straight into LinkedIn. It's kind of scuffed. You can't edit a scheduled post, but it gets the job done. So I just use that. There are other tools that have like a cleaner LinkedIn scheduling feature, like offsite third-party tools, but I don't want to juggle yet another tool. So I just use the LinkedIn post scheduler. So I'm really glad they added that. It's like a relatively recent invention. I think it's been around for like, I don't know, 6 to 7 months or something like that. It's like, it wasn't around when I first started posting to LinkedIn. Do I post at specific timings? So I post primarily at 9 a.m. because there's two big audiences on LinkedIn. There's like just kind of like North America, and I think like for engineering, like there's North America, and then there's India. So this 9 a.m. is like 9 a.m. Pacific, lets me cover like North America, but then folks in India are also able to like, not have to be awake at midnight to read my content. And if I do 2 posts in a day, I'll just like space them out 12 hours apart. So there's one at 9 a.m. and one at 9 p.m. Do you have tips on how to write posts that attracts recruiters to offer us interview opportunities, especially at big tech companies? Yeah. As Rahul and I've talked about before, this is one of those things where like, in order for you to achieve the goal, you shouldn't explicitly try to achieve the goal. Like if you just write posts that are like, please hire me at Netflix or please hire me at Google, like no one's going to follow you. It's going to be very annoying, right? Like you're going to achieve that goal by essentially treat it as more of a side benefit as opposed to your primary objective. So like if you want engineering recruiters to come to you and be like, I believe you'll be a valuable addition to my team at Fang, you should just post good engineering insights to your profile and like show that you're a good engineer and like try to help other engineers. And trust me, if you do that enough and you're able to get like tens of thousands of people behind you respecting your advice, your input as a good engineer, recruiters are going to take notice of that. So again, like when it comes to like trying to get into these companies, like people can smell like desperation, right? So like if you make it like, if you can become obsessed with like doing this thing, it comes off as negative and it's like a reverse halo effect. So yeah, like just, this is something that Paul Graham, the founder of like YC, told us. Is just like, just be genuinely useful to people. And if you make it your mission to just be as genuinely useful to people as many times as possible, you're going to generate tremendous amount of value, both in your career and your personal life long term. Do you have any advice on generating ideas for posts? So it's literally my job to talk to engineers. So that's how I get most of my post ideas. And I also have a lot of experience and I've worked at a lot of different companies. Kind of expanding on my process more, there's kind of 2 things I do. Number one is working backwards, which is like, okay, there's this Q&A on Taro that I think is really good, or video on Taro I think is really good. I'm going to work backwards on how I can write like a compelling post that plugs specifically for that video. The other way is like working forward, which is like, okay, I have this like concept, like I want to talk about Agile. Like I know I want to talk about Agile, and like I'm starting at this Agile point and I'm going to like work forward and just like fill in the rest of the blanks to like write the post about Agile. Yeah, and then the last way is you kind of sit there and try to come up with ideas, but it's generally like not super great. Like I think it's better if it's like organic. Like I think if you like, the key to creating good content is to have your finger on the pulse, right? Because like the goal of creating content, well, the ideal goal of creating content is you're trying to provide genuinely useful advice for people, right? So if your goal is to do that, your goal is like just talk to people, like interact with others, understand their problems, see what they're talking about, right? And then from there, you can extract something of value that you can say. Okay, Raul with a bunch of links. All right, that's actually all the questions in chat, not as many as I thought. Cool. Raghu.
Hey, Alex. Thanks
Hello.
for the session. Hi, you can hear me?
Yeah, all good.
Awesome. All right. The question that I have is, so I used to post on LinkedIn, but then I kind of fell off the track. So what I'm noticing is like there's a sense of imposter syndrome where kind of getting back into the posting game. I'm sure you have also faced some of this imposter syndrome. So what are your tips for kind of handling it and overcoming imposter syndrome? Because it kind of leads to more like freeze response, like, okay, not sure what to write, where to begin. So what are your thoughts on handling imposter syndrome?
Yeah, the good news is that imposter syndrome, when it comes to like posting content on LinkedIn, I feel like is much easier to deal with than imposter syndrome about like the core of your abilities as a software engineer, employed at a company or just like building stuff in general. And I'm just gonna go back to that slide I had about like, remember, it's just social media. Like at the end of the day, like if you write a bunch of LinkedIn posts, and I mean, as long as they're not like outright offensive or anything, like if you write a bunch of posts that don't do well and don't really get engagement, that's fine, right? Like it's just social media. Like that has no indication of your quality as a person, right? So I think it's easier said than done, of course, but like something I learned about LinkedIn is just, I mean, just don't care, right? Like I just write posts on LinkedIn, and then if people like it and react to it, that's great. If people don't like and react to it, that's also fine. I mean, it sucks a bit because I didn't invest some time to write the thing, but I didn't invest that much time, right? Because again, I'm only spending like 10 to 15 minutes per post. And it cancels out because like for every post I write that doesn't do as well as I thought, there's another post that overperforms just because I post so much. Volume conquers variance. So yeah, just don't care. And I think if because I can totally get how reading comments online can really kill your mood. You don't have to read the comments on your posts, right? You can just post and just look at how many reactions and views it got and just don't read the comments. I don't read the comments on LinkedIn anymore. They just make me frustrated. And they're also going to contribute to imposter syndrome because like when people choose to engage with something on the internet, it's generally because they're angry at it, not because they like it. So like statistically, you generally get a lot more angry comments than like supportive comments, because the people who resonate with your content on the internet, they generally would just like passively engage. They'll give it a like or an upvote and they'll move on. But then the people who are angry are like, I mean, they're really invested because like, they're angry, right? Like you have slighted them in some way, so they're going to spend that extra effort to write something negative, right? And it's important to like not let that get to you. And the most overt way of doing that is like literally just don't read the comments.
Got it. Thank you. And another follow-up question, and probably keep it short, is I know nowadays, I think people do also kind of contribute to like this collaborative articles. What are your thoughts on is that a good strategy, like contributing to collaborative articles in a way to, start building a following or building some thought leadership?
That's a Rahul question. I have no idea how that works. I feel how that feature works on LinkedIn actually.
Yeah. Okay. So I can chime in here. It's a great question, Raghu. So just for context, I was part of this program called the LinkedIn Creator Accelerator Program, the CAP program, where they picked a couple, I think like 24 or 48 people, I forget. There's a couple dozen people they picked in North America last year, and we were given early access to certain features, like for example, scheduling posts that Alex talked about. I actually had access to that a little bit earlier. And another thing they brought up was collaborative articles. And the idea of collaborative articles is that they have like ChatGPT write generic, like, Chat GPT kind of sounding article about teamwork or unit testing or time management. And then they'll have humans, like experts, who come in and augment that to make it like a mind meld between human and machine. And if you contribute to enough of those articles and you get enough upvotes, then you can actually get a top voice badge, which I actually got one a little while ago. Frankly, I don't know if it has any real, it really makes no difference in my engagement. So like, on a day-to-day basis, it has not really improved my life at all. I mean, I think badges are always good. And if I could collect more badges, I'm happy to do that if there's not that much work involved. But in terms of actually changing the number of impressions I get or the number of comments I get, I haven't really noticed a difference. And the thing with these experimental features is that LinkedIn does kill a lot of them. I mean, any big company, if they're not seeing enough uptake, they're going to kill it. And so in general, I would rather all of you focus your time on exploiting known algorithmic traits that Alex talked about, rather than trying out brand new things, unless you really care about that new feature or you want to be experimental. Most of the time, it's not worth it. Hopefully that helps.
Yeah, thank you.
Next
Shabaj,
question.
go for it.
Yeah, Shabaj. Yep.
All good. Thank you so much, Alex, for hosting this session. I had a question about just, and you mentioned just, be useful on the internet. And I guess that could be through your own experience in the industry or just through your side projects that you build. I guess like in my case, the best way I could be perhaps useful is just through all the things that I've learned through building, long-term projects that I kind of hope to turn into, like companies or startups. But I guess the thing that scares me is that like, then I may like, I have this feeling it's like, if I start talking about those things, if I go on LinkedIn and say, look, I've been working on this project, been doing this is be more open, I will become less employable, right? Because recruiters are gonna or managers are gonna look at me and be like, well, this guy is just focused on his own thing. He doesn't like there's no point in hiring. And I felt this way. Like I interviewed in the last month with a bunch of startups. And if even if I bring like even mention it slightly, it's like I felt like it's been hurting me. But I guess that's specific for LinkedIn. But I've seen Twitter is a much better place for this because there are more people like what I'm trying to do on Twitter. So I found Twitter to be a much better place, but for LinkedIn, especially for these sorts of things. So I guess my question is like what how should I, if I want to post on LinkedIn, how should I be careful about not coming off as like not employable, right? Like that's not my goal. The goal is like recruiters want to look at me, oh, let's hire this guy. But if I go on and say, look at this personal project, this startup I'm building, they're gonna be like, nah, screw this guy. So like that's my question.
Yeah, that's a good question. Like one about the kind of building your own thing in general, and is that a detractor, and does very active LinkedIn presence like hurt your employability? And answer is yes, if you post the wrong stuff. So yeah, Rahul and I now have this cheat code because we don't work for any big company anymore. And that was actually something that was tactically top of mind for me, because back when I was employed at Meta and Robinhood, like spinning up tech career growth, I was extremely careful about what I posted, because if I say the wrong thing, I could get fired, right? And so whenever I did post, it was very, very rare. Most of my posts on LinkedIn back in those days were very tactile, which is like, hey, we have this free event coming up. We're gonna be teaching people about like whatever topic for free, very tame, right? And then every once in a while, I would write just like a post of like, here's some insight that I have. It's always like very tame. So that is like Rahul and I are admittedly like privileged in this regard, because like we can kind of be more spicy where we want to, because I mean like we don't work for like Facebook anymore. We don't work for the Zuck. But I still think you can still post the LinkedIn, right? Because like what's his name, like Adios Money, right? Like his kind of thing is he posts, he feeds, he's part of that like kind of overly positive LinkedIn archetype, right? It's really hard to hate on people for being positive and just like posting inspirational messages, and that stuff can do well on LinkedIn, and it can be valuable for people, right? If you write an inspirational post with enough eloquence and some genuine insight, you actually could brighten the mood of like several thousand people reading it, right? And like that adds value. So that's just like something to think about. I don't really have a framework on like, will this post make you less employable? That's just I think like the advice I give people, because like a lot of engineers in the Taro community, like they're still employed and they're posting on LinkedIn, I just tell them don't be dumb. Just don't be dumb. Like don't share anything about your company internally, or don't share things about companies that you're interviewing for. Don't try to pick fights on LinkedIn. Like don't try to say anything like super controversial. Don't be too spicy, right? About the side project thing, yeah, that one's interesting, because I actually think if you're building a side project, like actually like your goal is just to make a thing, especially if it's like just open source and doesn't make money, I actually think that helps you, especially interviewing with startups. I saw a lot of startups back when I was interviewing where on their job page, because I'm a mobile engineer, they would literally have as a requirement, must have published at least one app for fun to Google Play. It's literally a hard requirement. I've seen that at least 7 to 10 times, in which case side projects are good. But I think the tricky part is if you're actually trying to build a side project that you want to turn into a business, because then my immediate thought is this person is just going to be distracted at work because he's literally trying to start up a second company while he's working for my company. So I think that's the line to tread there. So yeah, if you're like going to go into entrepreneurship, like, yeah, probably don't be too public about that, especially if you're going to like also apply to jobs as a backup, because people are just going to be worried about like your dedication. And I also think there's like a lot of like contracts that you sign. I just remember from The Office, I don't know if Rahul remembers it, but like Michael Scott had like multiple jobs and they're like, you can't do this. Like, you should only be focused on your primary job. But anyways, yeah, that was all the stuff for me. Hopefully that made sense.
I think what I've at least like, here's an idea of what I've thought. It's like, I think what I thought of sharing on LinkedIn specifically is just in a disguise, like, hey, look, here are some of the problems that I ran into. And, these problems are very like generic related to full stack stuff. And there's a good chance that majority of people would run into these problems. Just like talk about the problem itself, like how you could, deploy a full stack application in a much better way, like have logging, like those sorts of things. And just like abstract away the fact that I'm doing this stuff because for my own project, but just because I ran into this problem, here's how I tackled it, and here's how you guys could tackle it as well in the future. Like that's like things like, what can I talk about in such a way that I just don't mention that, hey, look, this is a project that I'm working. It's just
yeah. I think this stuff is great. LinkedIn for this will help people probably if you're going to post LinkedIn. The LinkedIn engineering base, like the engineers who use LinkedIn regularly are overwhelmingly earlier in career, like 80% L3 and L4, and like I guess L2 because they're interns and apprentices and stuff. So this tactical stuff, like this is how you make your NPM 20% faster. LinkedIn actually really likes that stuff. So that's perfectly fine, and it's pretty tame too, because it's just like, here's like a tactical thing to make your technical stuff a little bit faster and cleaner. Yeah, you should totally share that if you feel like you went through a lot of struggle to extract that learning and you feel like it's applicable to like a large portion of the stack, like a popular tech stack that people are working on. It's also better to decouple it, right? Because like you don't, like if you have, let's say you have a post which is like, I'm working on this project and then I learned this, right? That kind of violates like the first sentence thing that I talked about, because like at the end of the day, like people don't really care that this piece of valuable advice came from your project. Like it's kind of like how a lot of people complain that for all these like cooking vloggers, like before they go into the recipe, they like talk about their life story for like 10 minutes before they actually like start cooking. Kind of the same thing, right? Just jump straight into the value, which is like,
got it.
Add this line of code, use this library, it'll make like your thing 50% faster. It's actually a good thing to like remove that context. So like, yeah, it kind of removes that risk of like not being employable because it's like attached to your side hustle, and then just makes the post more compelling because it just gets to the point a lot faster. So yeah, you should totally do that. You should experiment and see, and then if people resonate with that. But yeah, I see a post that I've seen posts that go viral where it's like they're literally sharing like a Git command. They're like, this is a Git command that like makes your rebases slightly easier, and then it gets like 1,000 reactions. I'm like, oh wow, okay.
Thank you very much. Yep, that helps.
I know. Okay, yeah, Josh, you've been waiting for a while. Sorry for the wait, but
oh, no problem. Yeah, I was just curious specifically about the like switching your profile on LinkedIn to be creator mode. If your main intention of using LinkedIn is still just like job search related, does switching to creator mode still make sense, or would it be a signal to recruiters that you're like not a normal hireable person or something?
That's a good question. It'd be nice if you had a recruiter here. I think in that case, the creator mode is definitely much more like neutral. I don't think it would be negative, but I also don't really see how it would be helpful, because like if you're not actively posting on LinkedIn, like your goal is just to use LinkedIn to, just apply to jobs, talk to recruiters, and like it's not like your follower account's going to grow, right? Your follower account is going to be a one-to-one mapping to your connection count. It doesn't really convey that much more information. I guess it's a little bit more information because the connection count display caps at 500, and if you have like 650 connections, then it'll convert to 650 followers. But I don't really think that helps. So yeah, I wouldn't worry about creator mode if you're just trying to use LinkedIn, I guess the normal way. But maybe Rahul has some insights
like
here.
I would like, I just write a post whenever I like inspiration strikes, but I'm not like actively like even intending to. So for maybe that use case, I'll just leave it.
Yeah, I think you can just keep it off.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, quick question. Yeah, do hashtags make a difference in impressions/reach? I actually don't know. There's this infographic I found online somewhere claiming that like if you have like these featured hashtags on your profile, like I'm an expert in like these hashtags, and it claimed that if you included three or more of those hashtags in your post, it would get like a 5 to 10% boost. But like that's really hard to mathematically verify because 5 to 10% isn't super noticeable. I just include it anyways because like why not? It's already muscle memory for me to like include some of those hashtags. But yeah, it's an infographic on the internet. It could easily be like misinformation. So I don't know. If you want to attach the hashtags, you can. If not, like you don't have to. Wait, Rahul, do you attach hashtags to all your stuff or no?
I'm not good about it. Like the one I did today, actually, about like revealing my meta compensation. I actually meant to, but then I forgot. So short answer, no, I typically don't.
Yeah, probably not too important. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I need to go eat dinner. But yeah, thanks everyone for attending. Yeah, LinkedIn I think is just super interesting. Like I did not think LinkedIn would have so much value for just kind of like my career overall. Like, I was totally sleeping on LinkedIn until like early 2022, and it's been kind of crazy like the amount of benefit that LinkedIn has had. Like I mean, it's driven a ton of traffic to Taro. That's like a very tactical benefit, but I've also met a lot of awesome engineers I normally wouldn't have through LinkedIn. Like Lee McKeeman is actually someone that Rahul and I met through LinkedIn. Like he noticed our post and he's like, you guys are posting some pretty insightful stuff. And then we're like, oh, hey, you're also posting some pretty insightful stuff. And that's how I kind of Lee McKeeman entered the Taro ecosystem. And Lee's awesome. And so yeah, LinkedIn is just I think it's more than just like a raw job searching platform. That's what it was like 10 years ago, but I think it's evolved quite a lot in the past 5 years in particular. So yeah, there's a content creators LinkedIn channel in the Taro Premium Slack if you want to kind of join in and join the LinkedIn train. If not, no worries. Content creation takes a lot of effort and mental bandwidth. But yeah, thanks everyone for attending once again, and I'll see y'all later. Bye.